These projected numbers for Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel paint a pretty interesting picture about how their rookie campaigns will play out. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. Stat projections for Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders and what the numbers could mean for each of their rookie seasons. We've got another rookie stat projection for the Browns that I think is a little too low, and the Browns are on the right side of history, I'm happy to say. I do want to thank you, for being an everyday at the Locked On Browns podcast, making this your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with bonus content on some weekends as well. And it's totally free to you. Just hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you get your podcasts. And, of course, at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel, where you can also get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discussed today in the comment section. This is your team, so be part of the conversation every single day. And, yes, there are some early stat projections being floated out there for Shedeur Sanders, for Dillon Gabriel, for other Browns rookie players, which we'll get to coming up. But I wanted to start with the quarterbacks because they are, of course, the topic du jour for the Cleveland Browns at this point in the offseason. And as we start to sort through this quarterback competition, really starting next week with OTAs, but obviously playing out throughout the next couple weeks up to veteran minicamp, and then we get the lull in the summer, the break in the summer, before things will really ramp up and the heat will really ramp up on it come training camp in July/August. So these come from Mike Clay of ESPN. He sort of did a piece that was projecting out what the potential stat lines will look like for all these different rookie quarterbacks, rookie running backs, rookie receivers, for fantasy purposes, like what their fantasy seasons could sort of be, what they could ultimately look like. And he paints an interesting picture in terms of what the rookie campaign will look like for both Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. And based off of these numbers, based off of what he how many games he has them playing, this sort of feels like what I've been saying, how I've been sort of predicting the season is going to go, where a veteran starts the year, and then at some point the Browns decide, you know what? We got to put these guys out there. Let's go Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders in some order. Let's see what they can do. Let's put them out there. Let's let them play, get the real live reps that we can start to evaluate them and see where things kind of fall and what this thing looks like. And so he has Dillon Gabriel playing 5 games and throwing for 1,205 yards and 5 touchdowns. He has Shedeur Sanders playing 4 games and throwing for 925 yards and 4 touchdowns. I'm going to guess there's a lot of people listening to this show that feel like that's too low, maybe for Shedeur most notably, and that also feel like if he only starts 4 games, that you're not going to get like a clear picture of what he brings to the table. And so what I think is interesting here is like this actually forecasts out exactly the way that I kind of envisioned this when the schedule came out last week. I talked last week about the idea that the first 7 weeks of the season is kind of a gauntlet for the Browns. It is a bunch of teams that made the playoffs last year, Bengals being the only one that's not a playoff team from last year. And so maybe that's the stretch of the season that goes to a veteran. You see what your record is. If you're like 2-5 and kind of trending in the wrong direction, all right, time to try something new. Let's get Dillon Gabriel out there. He gets 5 starts. Shedeur gets 4. You finish out the season that way. Now I think I'm missing a game in there. Technically, there's 1 game missing. So maybe you give Shedeur an extra game. Maybe you give them 5 games. They both get 5 to sort of finish out the year, and they split that last 10. But it's kind of in line, at least with the way I was kind of projecting it to go, which I found kind of interesting to be from the start. But I do think like the big question I have based off of these projected numbers, and again, they're just projected numbers, and it's just a fun exercise for Mike Clay this time of year to sort of map out, hey, this is what their seasons could look like for all these rookies. Because he did this for everybody. He has Cam Ward on here, who, by the way, he has thrown for 3,392 yards and 20 touchdowns. He did it for Tyler Shuck of the New Orleans Saints. He did it for Jackson Dart of the Giants. So he has this on here for all these guys. But I thought it was interesting for the Browns' perspective, the number of games that you see these two rookies play, how many yards they threw for, how many touchdowns they threw for. But the big question for me, as it relates to the Browns quarterbacks and the numbers that Mike Clay put out there, is will the Browns have an answer on either of these guys being the franchise quarterback with those numbers in that stretch of time? And the answer is probably no when you really think about it. Like I've talked about this already. The Browns owe it to themselves to play both these rookie quarterbacks at some point next year if they're not going to start the season with them. And now maybe one of them or both of them, if both of them blow them away, they're going to have to find a way to split it. But if Shedeur comes out and blows everybody away the way that I think he can, potentially, and wins the starting job in August, which, by the way, like, this is a competition. This room is an island of misfit toys in the grand scheme of things. Like, it's Joe Flacco, it's Kenny Pickett, it's two rookies. Shedeur Sanders could certainly win the job. Dillon Gabriel, if he is the quarterback that the Browns think he is, because they clearly loved him and enjoyed the time they spent with him and felt like he was worth a third-round pick, if he plays really well in August, he could win the job. Like, I'm not counting out anybody in this competition, certainly not. And it could be something where they win it outright. My guess or estimation on a veteran starting the season is more so from a place of what I think that's what the Browns want to do, because I don't think they want to put either of these guys out there too soon. But off of that, like, if this is how it played out, where you get a rookie, you get Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders splitting like the last 9 or 10 games or so, and they each get 5-ish starts, and those are sort of the numbers that they give you. Will you have a clear-cut answer on either of them? I think the answer is obviously no. Like, 5 games is never going to be enough of a sample size for either of these quarterbacks to tell you, hey, we have our franchise quarterback. So it almost is going to be up to one of these guys to seize that moment, seize that opportunity to basically convince the Browns, hey, you don't have to draft a quarterback next year. But I feel like this is the way that it's going to go. And so we're probably going to be left still asking some questions or estimating or guessing on, well, based off what I saw, like, we'll all be making our fair share of predictions off of, if it's a 5-game sample size for both. Hey, I think this guy proved he can be it. I think this guy proved he can be it. Like, we'll go back and forth on that and decide. And it's going to be a major topic of conversation next offseason. Like, should they draft a quarterback, or should they see it through with one of these two guys? If those are the numbers that they put up, and that's the amount of games that they get. So it actually might serve the Browns better. Listen, they're going to play both in some capacity, because you owe it to yourself, if you're the Browns, to see what each brings to the table in that setting, in an actual game where the numbers matter, what they're doing matters, the tape matters. Like, you owe it to yourself to play both of them in games, and start to get an evaluation on them as players in this league on Sundays. But it almost would be better if, for the team and the franchise as a whole, if one of them really stands out, earns the job earlier on, or just from the jump in general, and you get a full evaluation of that player, because they get maybe 10 games or 12 games to sort of see if they can be that guy or not, and that gives you a better understanding. Ultimately, you're rarely ever going to get a full evaluation of a guy in just one season, but the Browns have to do the best they can to give these guys both opportunities and see what things kind of look like before they go in the next offseason with more questions about that position, or maybe an answer at that position. So we'll see what happens. But I thought these stat projections were interesting. I'm going to guess that people are going to be a little disappointed if Shedeur only ends up playing 4 games and he throws for 925 yards and 4 touchdowns. That seems like an obvious assumption to make. I think I'd be a little disappointed if he only plays that many games, even though it feels like that's where this thing could ultimately sort of go, is that a veteran starts for those first 6 to 7 games, and then they start playing the rookies. But this is more reason to root for one of those guys, or both of them, to really like stand out above the veterans. And so then you get a chance to evaluate them earlier. If one starts the season, then you turn it over to the other at a different point, and they really just split the season down the middle. Like that would be the Browns would be better served to have that happen than do the veteran to then both rookies later, and they each only get like 5 games in the long run. We'll see. I think again they both are going to have their shot here. We do need to talk more about what this competition is going to look like. Will it really be fair? What will the reps look like? Those types of things, and we'll get into some of that stuff next week. But I think they're going to run it that way. And because of that, I think both these guys, but especially Shedeur, because I think Shedeur is a better player than Dillon Gabriel, and I've said that. The Dillon Gabriel pick remains perplexing to me. So I think Shedeur especially has a chance to earn that starting job, but I think both guys are going to have their fair shot at it because the Browns want to give them as much opportunity as possible to become the starter if they really are that ready to do so now. I also think they want to slow play it, though, and we'll talk more about that again, as I said, next week. Those were some projections for the quarterbacks. Another projection for Quinshon Judkins, and I think his marks in this exercise from Mike Clay are a little low. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. Imagine how much more enjoyable watching that Pacers-Knicks game from the other night would have been if you had built out a parlay using live mid-game props. At this point, it feels like a must to just bet the Pacers on a big fourth quarter comeback if they find themselves trailing late. So go ahead and pair it with some Tyrese Halliburton props because you know he's got ice in his veins. He's going to hit that game-winning shot the same way it wasn't a game winner, but he game-time shot to force overtime that he thought was a game winner. You know he's going to be able to deliver in those key moments of the game. FanDuel makes it easy to get in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet, and if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. So we talked about the quarterback projected numbers from Mike Clay, which, like I said, I think people will believe that Shedeur Sanders' numbers are a little bit lower than what they're hoping for. And maybe there's some Dillon Gabriel supporters out there who think that his numbers were a little bit low based off those projections because they only get to play in 4 and 5 games, and they're going to want to see them for more than that. So, Mike Clay also, via ESPN, did the running backs of this year's class and projected out what their numbers are going to look like in year one as well. And what I found interesting was that he only had one guy going over 1,000 yards, and that was Ashton Genty of the Las Vegas Raiders, going for 1,120 yards. Now, listen, I think I get what he's trying to do here. He's kind of tempering the expectations. And listen, these are ultimately like projections at the end of the day. It's just kind of a fun exercise. But I do think like going for 1,000 yards isn't the challenge that it used to be in the NFL. The biggest thing preventing it from happening oftentimes is just the fact that these running backs are on timeshares. Like they share reps. It's often a split backfield nowadays. You usually have 2 running backs, not just one workhorse running back. Like the days of like the workhorse running back have dissipated more recently. And so I do think there's reason to believe like, okay, maybe Quinshon, he's going to be splitting reps with Dylan Sampson. That we know. We know that for sure. They're trying to build this kind of dynamic duo out of the backfield the same way they had with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb back in the day in the early tenure of Kevin Stefanski's time here in Cleveland. So it's going to be sort of this timeshare. It's going to be them sharing reps and whatnot. But I do think Quinshon is going to be so heavily featured in this offense that I would be shocked if he doesn't eclipse 1,000 yards this season. So in my opinion, this projection is too low for Quinshon, but he has Quinshon Judkins going for 922 yards and 6 touchdowns. Again, he's not that far off from 1,000 yards, but that's why I say it's probably just a little too low. Like I think he's going to eclipse that mark. I think 6 touchdowns might be reasonable. Maybe he could have a couple more in there. I think the idea here is like they're going to spell each other as maybe Sampson's more the third down back. Also, Jerome Ford comes into play here because he took that pay cut. He changed his contract. He agreed to a changed contract, an altered contract, to stay with the team at a lower rate. And so he becomes a factor in this as well. And so maybe that's the thing that like prevents him from getting to 1,000 yards, Quinshon that is. If they're really going to like use these guys, all three of them in different roles and rotate them around, and that's going to kind of be the mindset here, then maybe Mike Clay's projection ends up being a little bit right in that, okay, maybe that's what was part of the factor here too, is like you got three guys who are all going to want the rock. How are you going to manage that? And so he's only going to end up with 922 yards. But I just think, I talked about it on an earlier episode about him being the most impactful rookie. This offense needs an identity. They're going back to what they do best. This Kevin Stefanski offense has thrived when they have a good run game. The quarterback situation also makes the run game that much more important because they're going to bank on that being their bread and butter. They're going to bank on that for some security as a safety net of what they're going to do and sort of the home base of what they want to do when they're changing out quarterbacks throughout the season, because we do believe that's going to happen. Even Mike Clay believes that's going to happen based on the projections that he had for both Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. So there's something to be said for the idea that because there's uncertainty at quarterback, that you're going to have a running back situation that you're heavily leaning on to sort of produce your offense and spark your offense and guide your offense. And so that's where I believe that Quinshon Judkins is going to be very, very important and critical to what this team is going to do. It's why I believe he's going to be the most impactful rookie on the Browns this season, because they are going to emphasize that as part of their game, and it's going to be again like that home base, that thing that they do so well, that they're going to do it all the time and build off of that. The play action game can be built off of when they run the football. And I think this is going to get back to the early years of Kevin Stefanski here in Cleveland, where the run game was kind of the run game was the identity, and then everything else kind of spiraled off of that. Everything else kind of built off of that. And it's what made the offense and the team very successful in those early years, especially his first year here in 2020 when they made the playoffs, was that you had a solid run game to bank on. And going back to Kevin Stefanski's wide zone, 12 personnel, system where he banks on, he uses that run game so effectively, it's going to be like, I just can't envision a world where Quinshon Judkins isn't featured enough that he gets to 1,000 yards this season. And maybe they don't want him to because they, in the ilk of setting up Nick Chubb, like setting this up like Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt back in the day, maybe they want those guys to share carries enough that neither feels like they have this burden on them, or they're being utilized too early on in their careers and already starting to like get that mileage built up. Like if they want to make it lesser than and lessen the blow of these hits and the early usage in their career, I can understand that. I just still think like getting to 1,000 yards isn't as difficult as it used to be. And so it feels like a feat that's going to be something Judkins can get to. I also just go back to the fact that at the end of the season, you heard it, like Joel Bitonio, Jack Conklin, who was a little less political in the way he worded it, like talking about losing their identity and going away from what it is that they did best. They were both in a sense referring to the fact that they were a really good running football team over the years, as they've both been staple members of this offensive line. That was always the thing they could fall back on, was we have a strong run game and everything else kind of, domino, or like there's this rippling effect off of that of what we can do when the run game is working effectively. And they got away from that last year and they became just a pass happy team. Some of that was the offensive coordinator. Some of that was the offense being built around Deshaun Watson, and you're not necessarily leaning on the run game as much, but they're going to get back to that this year. And so understanding that, I think, is the important piece of why I think this running back room tandem, if you will, is going to be really, really fun to watch this year. Why they're going to have success. I'm not saying Sampson's also going to go for 1,000 yards, but I think Quinshon absolutely can get there. He is going to be a focal point of this offense. He is going to be leaned on to, again, just be sort of that steady Eddie, going out, scoring touchdowns, keeping the sticks moving, keeping the offense in ahead of those sticks. And frankly, like off of last year where you had a team that was anemic at scoring points, you need somebody who can get that ball in the end zone, and Quinshon is that guy. So I think these projections in general are low. The 7 touchdowns Or sorry, he only had 6 touchdowns. The 6 touchdowns isn't terrible, but I think he could score more than that. But it's more so the yards that I'm looking at here, because I think he's going to eclipse 1,000 yards in year one, because I think his usage is going to be up there, because the Browns know everything with this offense, going back to Stefanski's system, revolves around that strong run game. And he's going to be such an important part of just getting them back to what they do best in 2025. It's good to know that the Browns are on the right side of history. I'll tell you what I'm talking about coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. All right, there was a major vote that took place in Minnesota at the owners' meetings this week over whether or not they were going to ban the Eagles' vaunted play that seems to be very controversial, the Tush Push. And as it turned out, they got 22 votes to ban it, 10 votes not to ban it. And I think it was good to know that the Browns were on the right side of history in being a team that voted against banning the Tush Push. Now, this was expected from pretty much everybody. Kevin Stefanski actually joked at the first owners' meetings in March that they were going to support Sirianni and vote against banning it. Like, he made his stance clear that it's not something that they think they need to ban. He made their stance clear that, like, you know, I think the joke was something along the lines of like, hey, Nick can thank us because he's, you know, because we're gonna help him out here, like something like that. A very bland Kevin Stefanski joke that way. But yeah, like we knew that the Browns leaned this way. So it's not a surprise that they voted this way. I just think that it was the right move. I think it's good that the Browns were on the side of voting against banning it, because I am very much in the camp that the Tush Push should stay, and that the griping over it comes from largely teams just being frustrated that they can't stop it. And I do think there's an entertainment value piece here too, but I don't like that that wasn't the argument. Like the argument had lost its, if that's your argument, that you don't think it's entertaining from like a viewing standpoint, and that's why you want to get rid of it. That's not the argument that was being made, at least not what it seems like, from the Green Bay Packers who proposed this rule and teams that were also voting to ban it. Like, it feels like the gist of it was just that they tried to pitch it as a player safety thing. And I think that's just a straw man fallacy here, that they were trying to find something to attach it to make their case more valid as to why they should ban it. And there's no legitimate evidence proving that the play is more safe or that more injuries occur on the play. And I'm sure that's why they brought in people like Jason Kelsey and whatever to talk about this at the meetings this week, because they wanted to get a point across that, you know, this is sort of a witch hunt in this way, that they're using it again, that this is the argument being made against the play. And here's what I'll say. Like, I actually would be more accepting of the teams that want to ban it if they had just done it from, like, pitched it that way. And maybe in the meetings they did, because it's not like I was in the room. I don't know. But maybe in the meetings and these conversations, it did become more about, like, we just think it's a useless play. It's boring, whatever. But from the outside looking in, the idea that they were trying to sell it as, well, injuries, and it's a player safety thing. Like, this league ignored player safety for so many years. And so I think it's funny that they now want to, like, use that as the tagline for everything that they just want to get rid of or ban or they don't like or whatever. And so a team doing that just felt very, very silly to me, and very just, again, I didn't agree with it. I thought that was the wrong way to approach it. If you want to just try to sell everybody on the fact that it's a boring play and it's not entertaining, I can get that, because I've heard people pitch that as, like, I don't like knowing that, like, they're going to come out in this formation, run this play, and they're going to get the first down no matter what, and there's no suspense with it. That's the same reason why they moved the extra point back, right? So I can wrap my head around that. I still disagree. You can't just get rid of a play because you can't stop it. Like, I was the same way. I said the same thing about the shift in baseball, where I thought banning the shift was also wrong. It's a strategic move that you get a chance to execute to try to help your team win. And if you don't like it, then hit the opposite way of the shift. I know that's easier said than done in baseball, but in the NFL too, it's like, okay, you can't stop this play. Find a way to stop it. Or find a way to replicate it, because that's the biggest thing. It's like, it's not like there's some. This isn't like a thing that around the league everybody's running, and so it's boring because everybody can do it, and it's just as like a non-factor play anymore because you know what the result's going to be. Like, no. The Eagles run it to perfection. They've mastered the ability to execute this play, and nobody can stop it, and so people are mad about it. And that's what this all just feels like to me. I use the term witch hunt. I feel like that's maybe a fair way to sort of put this there. But the Browns were one of the 10 teams that voted against banning the Tush Push, and so it stays at least for another year. I'm sure we'll have these conversations again. And it's not surprising because let's think about this for a second. I think it's pretty obvious at this point. It's well documented that the Browns have a really good relationship with the Eagles organization. Andrew Berry hails from that organization. He is a Howie Roseman disciple. His brother still works for that organization. Kevin Stefanski grew up in Philly and seems like he has a pretty good relationship with that organization. They're doing joint practices with them for the third time since Kevin Stefanski and this regime has been in charge here. Later this summer, they'll meet up in Philly and do all that before a preseason game later in the week. So clearly there's this relationship there that they forged, and they felt inclined to vote with them. Now, what I find interesting is, what will this look like in 5 years when more coaches of the 10 teams that voted for not banning it are changed around? Will Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry be here in 10 years? In like 5 years? And if they're still voting on this and trying to get enough votes, what will the voting look like? Will a new coach come in and feel like when they don't have that? It reminds me very much of like the show House of Cards, where there was all the, and I know that it can be a touchy subject in some respects, but early on that show was awesome because you got like these behind the scenes look into politics, and like there's like the whip, right, who's in the House or the Senate, and like they're whipping up votes. And so this idea that like the Eagles are going around trying to like whip up enough votes to make sure that it wasn't going to get banned is funny, because they only missed it by only two votes short of what you need to pass legislation in the NFL. You need 24 votes, and they got 22, or there's 22 votes that are needed, or 24 votes that are needed to pass anything. 22 teams voted to ban it. The 10 didn't. And so you had 2 teams basically that decided the fate of the rule. And so in a couple years, if more coaches are fired, if Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry aren't there to help back something like this, maybe we're talking about, the Tush Push actually getting banned. So we'll see how long this lasts. But for at least 2025, the Browns are on the right side of history, because I agree that banning this is silly just based off the premise of, well, we can't stop it, so why should it be a thing? And then trying to sell everybody on the fact that you're only banning it because you think it's a player safety issue, when that is just completely untrue, and there's no evidence to suggest that. Another episode down with the Dog Pound. Thank you for joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team. More to come. I am planning on having Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints on to talk about the idea and the prospect of trading for Chris Olave. Is he available? What would it take? We'll get to those conversations early next week, so make sure you hit that subscribe button and make sure you make Locked On Browns your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting, or you can keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being an everydayer at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. Have a great weekend. See ya.